The night has a different kind of hunger out on the highway. It swallows the light, eats the sound, and leaves you with nothing but the endless stretch of blacktop and the chilling whisper of the wind. You know that feeling, right? That primal dread that sinks into your bones when you're truly, utterly alone, with miles of nothing between you and whatever else is out there. Tonight, we're delving into a story sent in by a former gas station attendant named Sarah. A story about a graveyard shift, a desolate road, and a presence that still crawls into her nightmares. This isn't just a ghost story, it's a story about the veil between worlds tearing just a little, on the loneliest highway you can imagine. Sarah was just trying to make ends meet, like so many of us. She'd taken the graveyard shift at an old, rundown gas station known as the Last Stop. It sat on a desolate stretch of I-70, miles from the nearest town. Most nights it was just her, the flickering neon sign, and the constant, low hum of the refrigerators inside. The kind of place where the silence itself felt heavy, pressing in on you. The kind of place where the wind whistling through the cracks sounded suspiciously like a sigh. A place forgotten by time, seemingly clinging to existence by sheer, desperate will. A flickering ember against the vast, indifferent darkness of the American heartland. The first few weeks were uneventful, a blur of sleepy truckers, an occasional lost tourist, and the mundane rhythm of stocking shelves and cleaning the coffee machine. But even then, something felt off. The air was always cold, even on summer nights. The old fluorescent lights would buzz and flicker without warning, plunging sections of the store into momentary darkness, only to snap back on with a sickly yellow glow. And there was a smell. Faint metallic, like old blood and damp earth, that would sometimes waft in from the back storage room, even though she kept it meticulously clean. She'd chalked it up to the age of the building, a draft from somewhere she couldn't find, or maybe just her own exhaustion playing tricks. But deep down, a colder, more ancient part of her mind knew better. It was the scent of something profoundly wrong, something that lingered beyond the reach of bleach and disinfectant, a memory of forgotten atrocities seeped into the very foundations of the place. Then came the regulars, not the good kind, the friendly ones. These were the highway ghosts, the ones who just appeared. One man, in particular, always bought the same brand of stale coffee and a single pack of unfiltered cigarettes. He never spoke, never made eye contact. His clothes were always the same, a faded denim jacket, dark jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. What got to Sarah wasn't just the silence, it was his eyes. Even under the brim of his cap, she could feel them, like black holes, empty, lifeless, and always fixed on something just over her shoulder, just out of her sight. He'd pay an exact change, slide the money across the counter, and disappear back into the night as quietly as he'd arrived. No car, just gone. The sheer, impossible quiet of his movements, the utter absence of any personal detail, made him less a man and more a dreadful, recurring motif of the night. He was a harbinger, perhaps, a silent sentinel from a realm that pressed too closely against their own. One Tuesday night, a trucker she knew, an older guy named Gus, stopped in. He was a friendly soul, usually full of stories. But this night he looked pale. As Sarah poured his coffee, he leaned in, lowering his voice. "You ever hear the stories about this place, Sarah?" he asked, his eyes scanning the dimly lit aisles. Sarah shrugged. "Just old building stuff, Gus." Creaks and groans. Gus shook his head. "More than that, kid. They say this used to be a stop for folks who didn't want to be found. A lot of folks went missing round here. And this place, it was where they made their last call or their last mistake." He took a long sip of his coffee, his gaze drifting to the back storeroom door. "Some say they never left." He paid, gave her a grim look, and left, leaving Sarah with a new kind of chill that had nothing to do with the faulty heating. His words, uttered in that low, conspiratorial tone, twisted something cold in Sarah's stomach. It wasn't just old rumors, it was the echo of true despair, a memory of souls devoured by the highway's desolate maw. She felt the weight of countless lost lives pressing in, a ghostly congregation lingering just beyond the edge of perception. After Gus left, the quiet felt different, heavier. Every creak of the old building, every gust of wind against the glass, was amplified. Sarah tried to focus on her tasks, cleaning the hot dog roller, wiping down the counter. But her eyes kept darting to the windows, to the oppressive darkness outside. She felt a prickle on the back of her neck, that undeniable sensation of being watched. She went to the back, to the small office with the security monitors. 4 grainy black and white feeds flickered. Pump 1, pump 2, the cashier area and the main aisle. Everything looked normal, deserted, just as it always was at 3 a.m. But then, on the main aisle camera, she saw it, a shadow. Tall, elongated, standing perfectly still between the candy aisle and the chip display. It was too dark to be a person, too defined to be a trick of the light. It wasn't moving, just there. It seemed to drink the light, a negative space that pulsed with an unseen malevolence, a void given form, impossibly still, impossibly wrong. Sarah's breath hitched, she blinked, and just like that, it was gone, vanished. Her heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Just tired, Sarah, overactive imagination. She tried to rationalize it, to push the image away, but the chill in the room deepened. She could feel it now, the cold breath on her skin, the subtle shift in the air pressure, as if something enormous had just moved right past her. A whisper of something ancient brushed against the edge of her sanity, a premonition of horrors beyond the mere spectral. She quickly walked out of the office, forcing herself to be calm. The store was empty. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting their sickly glow over the silent shelves. Nothing, but the feeling of being watched intensified, pressing down on her, suffocating her. She felt like every hair on her body was standing on end. Then, a faint sound, a low, guttural murmur coming from the back of the store, the storage room, the same place where that metallic, damp smell often originated. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, more like a resonant vibration, deep in something's chest, trying to form words but failing. It was ancient, sorrowful, and utterly terrifying. It was the sound of a dream turning into a nightmare, of a forgotten language struggling to resurface from depths unknown, twisting itself into a symphony of dread that vibrated in her very bones. Sarah froze. Her hand instinctively reached for the heavy metal door of the office, ready to slam it shut and lock herself in. But curiosity, or perhaps sheer terror-induced paralysis, held her. She listened. The murmur grew louder, accompanied by a soft, rhythmic thumpy thump, like something heavy dragging itself across the floor. Each thump was a hammer blow against the fragile edifice of her reality, a measured beat counting down to an inevitable, unspeakable revelation. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, but her feet felt rooted to the linoleum. She crept forward, inch by agonizing inch, towards the storage room door. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible within. The smell, that putrid, metallic scent, was overpowering now, burning her nostrils. She pushed the door open just a crack, peering into the blackness. The room was mostly used for stacking empty boxes and old supplies. It was supposed to be empty tonight, but from the corner she saw it, not clearly, not entirely, but enough to sear itself into her mind forever. A figure, tall, impossibly thin, hunched over something on the floor. It wasn't human. Its limbs seemed too long, too twisted. Its skin, or what looked like skin, was dark and mottled, reflecting no light. It moved with a grotesque fluidity, a disturbing parody of life, like a marionette whose strings were pulled by an unseen, malevolent puppeteer from beyond the stars. The very air around it seemed to warp, the shadows deepening to an impossible black, devouring the meager light of the storage room. And as it moved, the thumping sound became clear. It was dragging something heavy, wet, and familiar. A limp, unrecognizable form that once held the spark of life. And then she saw its head. It turned slowly, deliberately, towards her. There were no eyes, just two deep, gaping hollows where eyes should have been, reflecting the dim light from the main store like pools of stagnant water. And in the center of its face, a wide, torn mouth stretched impossibly open, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. That guttural murmur emanated from that horrifying maw, a sound of agony and immense hunger. It was a face of pure, primordial terror, a mockery of form carved from the very fabric of despair, hinting at an origin in realms where logic and sanity dared not tread. The hunger in that sound was not for mere sustenance, but for something far more profound, something that preyed on the soul itself. Sarah didn't scream, she couldn't. The air had been sucked from her lungs, replaced by ice. She felt utterly, completely paralyzed by a terror so profound it felt physical. The figure began to straighten, slowly, unfolding its grotesque form, its head still cocked to the side, those empty sockets fixed on her. Each joint articulated with an unnerving click, each extension of its elongated frame a violation of natural law. It rose, a towering edifice of nightmares, its presence a cold, crushing weight that threatened to obliterate her very essence. It was not merely looking at her, it was consuming her with an alien, abyssal gaze, unraveling the threads of her being. The thumping stopped. It had dropped whatever it was dragging. She saw a flash of movement. A pale, exposed arm, thin and scarred, disappearing behind the creature. A human arm, she realized with a fresh wave of nausea, dreadfully pale and undeniably scarred, disappearing into the unspeakable mass behind the creature, a final, chilling testament to its grim feast. And then the creature took a step, a slow, deliberate step towards her, its long, bony fingers unfurling, reaching. That was when the spell broke. Adrenaline surged through her veins, a cold, violent shock. Sarah slammed the storage room door shut with a force that rattled the entire building. She didn't bother with the lock. She spun around, tripping over her own feet, scrambling for the front door. Her hands fumbled with the deadbolt, her fingers numb with fear. She yanked it open, not caring about protocol, not caring about the alarm she was sure to trigger. As she stumbled out into the cool night air, the wind seemed to scream her name. She heard a sickening crack from inside the gas station, a sound that spoke of wood splintering under impossible force, of metal tearing, followed by a raw, inhuman bellow that ripped through the night, a sound from the deep, primal fears of humanity, curdling her blood and stripping away the last vestiges of her courage. It was right behind her. Sarah didn't look back, she didn't dare. She ran, propelled by pure, unadulterated terror, across the asphalt, past the pumps, towards her beat-up car parked near the road. Her keys, miraculously, were in her hand. She tore open the driver's side door, threw herself inside, and fumbled for the ignition. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. As she peeled out onto the highway, tires squealing, she risked a glance in her rearview mirror. The gas station was a stark silhouette against the horizon, its neon sign still flickering, a lonely beacon in the oppressive darkness. And in the doorway, bathed in the sickly yellow glow, stood that impossibly tall, skeletal figure. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching her disappear into the night, watching with those empty, hollow eyes. Sarah never went back to the last stop. She never worked another graveyard shift. She moved across the country, trying to outrun the memory, but it always catches up. Every time she sees a desolate stretch of road, every time the silence gets too heavy, every time she catches a whiff of that metallic, putrid scent, she remembers. She knows what Gus meant. The highway has its own kind of hunger. A hunger not for flesh alone, but for sanity, for hope, for the very idea of safety in a universe far colder and more indifferent than we can ever truly comprehend. And sometimes, it's not just the darkness that's watching you from the edges of the light. Sometimes, it's something else, something ancient, something predatory, that waits in the lonely places for a last stop, for a last mistake, the last stop. A fitting name, perhaps, for a place that marks the boundary between the mundane and the truly, utterly unthinkable. And its doors, once opened, might never truly close. And maybe, just maybe, it's still waiting there, for you.